Hey everyone, it was round 7 of the British Chess Championships today, and there was only one clinical result in the top 6 games, and surprisingly this was between Richard Pert and his brother Nicholas Pert. Now usually when these two play, it's usually a quick draw between brothers, which is usually expected because you know each other's repertoire, you know what they're going to play, and it's not really fun to play your brother in a tournament. But this is actually a 9-round tournament, so maybe this is why they decided to go for it in this game. But Richard Pert, the international master, is white in this game, and his brother Nicholas Pert, the GM, is black in this game. So white plays d4 here, black played d5, and after c4, c6, knight c3, knight to f6 and knight to f3, we get into a Slav defence, and black takes on c4 now. And actually white plays quite a rare move here. He plays e4 in this game, opening up the bishop on f1 to attack the c4 pawn. Traditionally in this opening, a4 is usually a typical move here, stopping b5 from black, and play usually continues bishop f5, e3, e6, and bishop takes c4. But in this game, Richard Pert decided to play e4, so opening the bishop again to attack c4, and black now plays b5 to defend the c4 pawn. So at the moment, black is a pawn up in the opening, but it just depends on how long black can keep this going, because white now has a very good lead in development. In the game, Richard Pert played bishop to e2, developing a piece, very sensible. And in the game, e6 was played. b4 is also possible here, I was thinking this, attacking the knight. So if the knight moves away, black can now take another pawn on e4. But then comes bishop takes c4, and after knight d6, bishop to b3, maybe bishop g4 can be played by black. It seems that white has a slight edge here. After castles in e6, h3, the bishop gets kicked away, and white starts infiltrating black's position now, and white can be tempted with sacrifices on the e6 square. Black can still develop though with bishop to e7, but after g4, let's say bishop g6, white can now capture on e6 with the bishop, and you feel like white's doing rather well here. I think castling here is the best move, but I'll just now go through this move. F takes e6, knight takes e6 and queen d7. The reason why it's so good is because white can now take on g7 with check. And after a move like king f8, just getting the pieces into the game, knight to e5, and bishop h6, queen f3 ideas are all threatened, and black's in a bad position now. So black didn't go for b4 here, probably a wise choice. He instead played e6, just keeping everything rather solid. White castled, and bishop b7 was played by black. So maybe preparing c5 and opening lines for this bishop on b7 to attack this g2 pawn. And the game b3 was now played by white. C takes b3 was actually definitely possible here, but I think after maybe e5 and knight d5, maybe knight takes d5 and queen takes, a takes b3, h6, and it's a rather even game. Again, black is still a pawn up, but white still has a lead in development. Maybe bishop e3, knight to e1 and bishop f3 can be played, and this is all rather quick for white, and just due to the piece placement I think white is slightly better. C takes b3 wasn't played in the game though, bishop to b4 was, attacking the knight on c3. And now white plays a very good move, very clever. Now I'm not sure whether this is theory or he calculated this, but he played the great move e5 here, hitting the knight on f6. If this knight ever moves to d5, white can play knight to e4, and suddenly white's got some great outposts for the knight to go into. So in the game, actually, black played bishop takes c3, so took the knight, and white took on f6. If black now decides to take the rook, black gets into a bit of trouble. F takes g7 can be played, so hitting black's rook. After rook g8, white can play bishop to g5, attacking the queen. And if black now plays a move like f6, amazingly white can actually play bishop to h6. And now white's attacking the bishop on a1. After bishop c3, it looks as though black's just the whole rook up, but actually queen c2 now attacks h7 and the bishop on c3. The bishop retreats to b4, white can play queen takes h7. If black plays king f7 here, white can just play knight to e5, and if f takes, just play moves like bishop to h5 with devastating consequences for black. So in this position king d7 is more likely to be played, but white can now follow up with b takes c4, and after moves like a5, white can infiltrate black's position with knight to h4, king c7 knight g6, and after king b6 c5 check, king a7, white's plan is just to drop the knight into f8, so the queen's now attacking the g8 rook. Black's forced to take on g7 and give the rook back. Queen takes g7, and after black plays knight to a6, white can play bishop to f3, and suddenly white's got a great position here. Black's pieces are all squashed together, and white's a pawn up. Knight c7, white can play knight to d7 and just jump into b6 for instance. Very nice position for white. So in the game, black must have seen this and didn't take the rook on a1. Instead they just simply took on f6 with the g-pawn, hoping to open their rook on the g-file. And of course white plays rook b1 to get away from that bishop, and try and open the b-file to attack the bishop on b7. c5 was played by black here, and white took on c4 with the b-pawn. Now I think the next move was black's biggest mistake. They took on d4 with the bishop, and suddenly black's position looks a little ropey. I think b4 was better, just blocking everything up and protecting the bishop on c3. Even if d takes c5, black can play queen takes d1. After rook takes d1, play rook g8. And suddenly black's attacking this g2 pawn with the bishop on b7 raking down. Play can continue bishop b2, but after bishop to e4 to hit the rook on b1. Bishop takes on c3, b takes c3, rook bc1 and c2. After rook d6 and knight c6, suddenly black's got a very nice position. The c-file's all blocked up and white has these two really weak pawns, and suddenly black has a pawn right on c2. It's going to be very annoying to get rid of. But in the game black played bishop takes d4, and now this allows white to really infiltrate black's position. In the game rook takes b5 was played, attacking the bishop on b7. Black moves it to c6 and white drops their rook back to b3. I should mention if bishop to a4 here, then white can just play knight takes d4. And if c takes d4, they can play rook takes b8, and suddenly white's hitting his bishop on a4 and also hitting the queen. And having won a knight already, it's impossible for black to maintain material. For instance, if bishop takes the queen, just rook takes d8, and rook takes d1, and suddenly white has two bishops for the rook, and this is not what black wants. So bishop a4 can't be played here, so it's very clever to play this move. Instead rook g8 was played in the game, so eyeing up this g2 square. g3 was played to stop this, and black develops with knight to a6. And even though white is a pawn down, they recognise that it's now time to attack black's weakened pawn structure. Richard Pert now took on d4. After c takes d4, played bishop to f3, so just trying to trade pieces here. If black plays bishop to f3 here, white can just play queen takes f3, and after rook c8, let's say, play queen h5 and threaten moves like queen b5 check, winning the knight. Black can play knight c5, and white can play moves like rook b5, again hitting the knight. If queen e7, white can take on h7, and we see how terrible black's position suddenly becomes. Let's say king d7, white can play bishop to a3. If rook h8, play queen c2, and black defends the knight once again, but after queen d1 hitting the rook, rook f5, queen takes d4, let's say queen d6, white now has some options such as rook b7, and they can't take that due to the pin on d6. So if rook c7, white can play rook to d1, and if everything gets traded, let's say king c6, takes, and g4, rook e5 and f4, rook e1 check, king f2, and finally after the rook moves to like a1, white can win material, bishop takes c5 and rook takes a2 check, and this is a one end game for white. So trading the bishops would not be good for black. This will just allow white to infiltrate their weakened pawn structure. Instead they played rook c8 in the game, supporting the bishop on c6. But after bishop takes c6 by white, rook takes c6, again queen h5 can be played, preparing maybe queen b5 and also attacking this h-pawn. So white's definitely going to win their pawn back with compensation. f5 was played to stop queen to b5, but now white just took on h7 and the rook moves to f8. And now white finally plays bishop to h6 and is about to win the exchange. And I really like white's game now, just keeps it really simple. Queen f6 was played in the game, but white just takes on f8, the king takes, and white plays rook to b7, so hitting a7 and also hitting f7 if that queen ever moves away. Black takes on c4 and now white takes on a7. So black has the knight and a pawn for the rook, but it's a terrible position for black to be in. It's going to be really hard to defend this. Knight c7 blocks the 7th rank, but now white finally gets their last rook into the game with rook b1. f4 is played by black and rook a b7 is played by white. Maybe white's plan is to just check and maybe even trade queens with queen to h4, or white can just simply start march this pawn down the board if they wish. In the game, king e7 was played by black, and white has a nice idea. They play rook b8 here. After e5 play queen g8, so going for the back rank. Rook c6 is played and white plays queen to d8. After king e6, white trades queens and they play rook to b6, so trying to trade rooks as well. Black captures, white recaptures with check and king f5. White trades on f4 and actually black plays a good move, knight to d5, hitting the rook and the pawn. But after rook b2, the king takes f4. White's plan is now simply just to launch this a pawn down the board, and there's very little black can do about this. Black plays e4, trying to maybe get a queen of their own, but a5 is just too fast. They play d3, but this rook on b2 does a great job of holding up these pawns for the time being. And white can just push with a6. Black plays f5. I think it's futile, but after a7, they play knight c7, defending a8. After king g2 though, king e5. White plays king f1, so this king can now chase these pawns if need be. After f4, white plays rook to b7, hitting the knight. And actually black resigned in this position, just due to the fact that after knight to a8, white can just play rook to b8, and even if knight c7 is played, they just play rook c8, and white's going to get a queen very quickly. So it's very hard to determine where black went wrong in this game, because it was a very sudden collapse of their pieces. But again, I think it was this move. I think black should just play b4 here. After b takes c5, just trade queens and play it simple with rook g8, and I think black's got a great position here. In the game, bishop takes d4 may have caused everything to collapse. Just after rook takes b5, we see black's position is quite weak now. The c5 pawn is very weak, a7's weak, and this h7 pawn. Basically black's just got 4 pawn islands to white's 3, and it's going to be easy pickings for white's queen when it's infiltrated that position. Anyway, I just thought this was a very nice game from Richard Pert, beating his higher rated brother. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the analysis of this video. Please drop a like, comment or subscribe to the channel if you want to watch more chess videos in the future. And I'll be with you next time for round 8 of the British Championships. See you next time.